Hello. Before we begin, I'm the storyteller. Let us know what time it is on your end and where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe. My name is Sarah, and I'm a 19-year-old college student in Vermont. I'm also a type 1 diabetic, which means I always have to be aware of my blood sugar levels and keep my insulin and glucose monitor on me. This detail becomes pretty important later on. Last September, I started volunteering at a community garden about 2 miles from my apartment. It was part of a class credit program through my college's environmental science department. The garden is in a semi-rural area on the edge of town, surrounded by dense woods on 3 sides. There are about 30 individual plots, though only maybe 15 were actively maintained. I'd go 3 times a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, usually in the late afternoon around 4 p.m. after my classes ended. I shared a plot with my roommate Maya, who's 20, though she only came with me maybe once every few weeks. Mostly, I'd go alone, which I actually preferred. It was peaceful, and I liked having that quiet time to decompress from school stress. The garden had this old wooden tool shed near the entrance where everyone stored their supplies, and there was a single porta-potty and a water spigot. On September 18th, I remember the date because it was Maya's birthday. I went to the garden around 4:30 p.m. It was a beautiful early fall day, probably 68 degrees, with that perfect golden afternoon light. I was planning to harvest some tomatoes and check on the pumpkins we'd planted in July. When I arrived, the parking area was empty except for my car, a 2018 Toyota Corolla. This wasn't unusual. Most people came earlier in the day to avoid the evening mosquitoes. I grabbed my canvas tool bag from the trunk and walked to our plot, which was toward the back of the garden near the woods. I worked for about 45 minutes, pulling some weeds and picking tomatoes. Around 5:15 p.m., I needed to check my blood sugar. My Dexcom glucose monitor was showing I was dropping a bit, so I went back to my car to grab some juice boxes I kept in a cooler in my back seat. That's when I noticed something strange. Sitting on my hood was a tomato, one of the heirloom varieties we'd been growing, with a distinctive yellow and red striping. It definitely hadn't been there when I arrived. I looked around, thinking maybe another gardener had left it as a friendly gesture, but there were no other cars in the lot. I felt uneasy but tried to shake it off. I grabbed my juice, drank it, and decided I'd pack up and head home earlier than planned. As I walked back to our plot to get my tool bag, I saw something that made my skin crawl. There were fresh footprints in the soft soil of our plot, boot prints much larger than my size 7 sneakers, and they weren't there 45 minutes ago when I'd been working. The prints circled around where I'd been kneeling, then led toward the woods. I quickly grabbed my bag and started walking fast toward the parking lot. That's when I heard branches snapping in the woods to my right. I looked over and saw a figure standing just inside the tree line, maybe 30 feet away, partially obscured by the foliage. They were wearing dark clothing and appeared to be watching me. I couldn't make out any facial features because of the shadows. I started running. When I got in my car, I fumbled with my keys and finally got inside and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. As I pulled out of the parking area, I looked in my rearview mirror and saw the figure had emerged from the woods and was now standing at the edge of the garden, watching my car leave. I drove straight home, my heart pounding the entire way. When I got to my apartment, Maya was there getting ready to go out for a birthday dinner. I told her what happened, and she seemed concerned but thought maybe it was just another gardener or someone cutting through the property. She convinced me it was probably nothing and that I should come to dinner with her and some friends to take my mind off it. I agreed, though I felt stupid for potentially overreacting. We went to dinner at this Thai restaurant downtown, and I tried to forget about the incident. We got home around 9:30 p.m., and I started getting ready for bed. At 10:47 p.m., I know the exact time because I screenshot the message. I received a text from an unknown number. It was a photo. My stomach dropped when I opened it. It was a picture of me kneeling in the garden plot that afternoon, taken from behind me, from the direction of the woods. The timestamp on the photo was from earlier that day. Below the photo was a message. "You forgot some tomatoes." I immediately showed Maya. She went pale and told me to call the police, which I did. While we waited for them to arrive, I received another text from the same number. "Nice apartment. Second floor corner unit." That's when we both started panicking. We lived in a corner unit on the second floor of a small apartment complex. Whoever this was knew where we lived. Maya grabbed a kitchen knife, and we locked ourselves in her bedroom, which faced the interior hallway rather than outside. I was shaking so hard, I could barely dial 911 again to let them know about the second message. The police arrived around 11:15 p.m. 2 officers came up to our apartment, and we showed them the texts and the photo. They asked about the garden incident, and I explained everything. One officer went outside to check the perimeter of our building, while the other stayed with us and took our statements. When the first officer came back up, his expression was serious. He said they found fresh boot prints in the mulch below our living room window, and what looked like evidence that someone had been standing there for an extended period, cigarette butts, and a flattened area in the bushes. They also found my canvas tool bag from the garden hanging on our doorknob. I had left it in my car trunk when I got home, or at least I thought I had. Someone had taken it from my car and brought it to our door. The officers checked my car and found that the trunk had been jimmied open. There were scratch marks around the lock that I hadn't noticed in my panic earlier. They took photos of everything and filed a report. They told us they'd increase patrols in the area and recommended we stay somewhere else for the night. We packed bags and went to Maya's boyfriend's house across town. Neither of us slept well. The next morning, the police called to say they'd reviewed security camera footage from a gas station near the garden and saw a dark blue Ford F-150 with no front license plate parked at the garden parking lot during the time I was there. The truck left about 10 minutes after I did. They couldn't get a clear view of the driver or the rear plate. We didn't go back to our apartment for 3 days. When we did, it was with Maya's boyfriend and his roommate to help us feel safer. We installed a Ring doorbell camera and window alarms on all our windows. The landlord changed our locks and added a deadbolt. The police traced the phone number to another burner phone purchased with cash at a Walmart 2 towns over. The security footage from that Walmart showed someone wearing a baseball cap and hoodie, face obscured, buying the phone 4 days before the incident. They couldn't identify the person. I never went back to that community garden. I dropped the class and took an incomplete, which I later made up with a different project. Maya and I didn't renew our lease when it ended in December. We found a new apartment in a busier part of town on the 4th floor with a doorman. It's been about 4 months now, and the person was never caught. I still get anxious when I'm alone, anywhere isolated. I check my car obsessively before getting in and after parking, making sure no one's tampered with it. I'm hyper-aware of my surroundings in ways I never was before. The thing that bothers me most is that I have no idea how long they've been watching me. Was it just that one day, or had they been observing my routine for weeks? Did they know I came every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 4 p.m.? The thought keeps me up at night sometimes. Looking back, I should have trusted my instincts the moment I saw that tomato on my hood. I should have left immediately instead of going back to the plot. But as the older person who was supposed to be responsible, even though Maya and I are close in age, I felt stupid for being scared. I wish I'd taken my fear more seriously from the start. I need to start this by explaining that I have severe asthma, which means I always carry my Ventolin inhaler and have to be careful about physical exertion, especially in cold air. I'm a 28-year-old guy living in rural Nebraska, and I volunteer as a weather spotter for the National Weather Service. It's something I've done for about 5 years now, mostly during tornado season, but also for winter storms. This happened last January during a particularly nasty blizzard that hit our area. I live alone in a farmhouse about 8 miles outside of the nearest town, which has a population of maybe 3,000 people. The house belonged to my grandfather before he passed, and I inherited it 2 years ago. It's pretty isolated. My nearest neighbor is almost a mile away down a gravel road. On January 11th, the NWS issued a blizzard warning for our county. They were predicting 12 to 18 inches of snow, 40-plus mph winds, and near-zero visibility. As a weather spotter, I'm supposed to report conditions periodically during significant weather events, so I plan to stay home and send in reports via their online system every few hours. The storm started around 2 p.m. By 4 p.m., we already had about 6 inches of accumulation and the wind was howling. My dog, a chocolate lab named Moose, was pacing nervously. He's never liked storms. I live in a 2-story farmhouse with my bedroom upstairs, and I have a small weather station set up in the backyard that feeds data to my laptop. Around 5:30 p.m., I went outside to clear snow off my weather station sensors so I could get accurate readings. I was only out there maybe 5 minutes. It was about 15 degrees with the wind chill much lower. When I came back inside, Moose was barking at the back door, which was odd because I just come in that way. I checked the door and found it was still locked, but there were boot prints in the fresh snow on my back porch that weren't there when I'd gone out 5 minutes earlier. They led from the side of the house, up onto the porch, right up to the door, then back off the porch and around toward the front of the house. My first thought was that maybe my neighbor had come to check on me since the storm was getting bad, though that would be unusual since we usually just text each other. I followed the prints around to the front of the house. They went up to my front door, then down my driveway toward the road, where they disappeared into the heavily falling snow. No vehicle tracks, which meant whoever had walked here. I texted my neighbor, "Hey, did you come by the house?" He replied within a minute, "No, why? Everything okay." I told him about the footprints, and he said he'd been home all afternoon and hadn't seen anyone walking on the road. He offered to drive over, but I told him not to risk it in the blizzard. Visibility was terrible. I convinced myself it might have been someone whose car broke down looking for help, and maybe they left when they saw my weather station equipment and thought nobody was home. It seemed like a reasonable explanation, so I went back to monitoring the storm. At 7:15 p.m., I submitted my hourly weather report. We were up to 11 inches of snow now, and the wind had increased a steady 45 miles per hour with gusts higher. The power flickered a few times, but stayed on. I made myself dinner and settled in to watch the conditions. Around 8:30 p.m., Moose started barking again, this time at the front door. I looked out the window and saw nothing but swirling snow in the glow of my porch light. Then I noticed something that made my heart race. There were fresh boot prints on my front porch, and my doorknob had been turned. I could tell because snow that had accumulated on it had been brushed off. I immediately locked the deadbolt, which I hadn't engaged earlier since I lived so remotely. I grabbed my phone and my grandfather's old Remington 870 shotgun from the closet. I'm not a gun person typically, but my grandfather had taught me how to use it, and I keep it around more for peace of mind than anything. I was trying to decide whether to call 911 when my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Let me in. I'm cold." My blood ran cold. I looked out the front window again and could barely make out a figure standing at the edge of my driveway, about 40 feet from the house, partially obscured by the blowing snow. They were just standing there, facing the house. I called 911. The dispatcher answered, and I explained the situation. She said she'd send a deputy, but with the weather conditions, it could take 30 to 45 minutes to reach my location. She stayed on the line with me. I watched the figure for a few minutes. They didn't move, just stood there in the blizzard. Then they started walking toward the house. I yelled through the door, "The police are coming. You need to leave." I don't know if they heard me over the wind. The figure walked right up to my front porch and stood at the door. I was watching from my living room window now, shotgun in hand, phone to my ear. The dispatcher was telling me to stay calm and stay inside. Then the person did something that terrified me. They held up my weather station's anemometer, the cup device that measures wind speed. They must have climbed up and taken it off the pole in my backyard. They set it down on my porch, then walked away toward the side of my house. I heard Moose barking hysterically from the kitchen, and then I heard glass breaking. My kitchen window. I ran to my bedroom upstairs with Moose and locked the door. I could hear footsteps downstairs now, heavy boots on my wooden floors. The dispatcher was telling me the deputy was still 15 minutes out. I was having trouble breathing. The stress was triggering my asthma, and I had to use my inhaler. The footsteps came up the stairs. Slow, deliberate. I watched the shadow appear under my bedroom door as they stopped right outside. Moose was going crazy, barking and growling. I raised the shotgun, pointed at the door, and yelled, "I have a gun. The police are almost here." The shadow didn't move for what felt like forever, but was probably only 30 seconds. Then I heard them walk back downstairs. I heard more movement, the sound of things being knocked over, and then nothing except the wind. The deputy arrived at 9:23 p.m. I remember checking my phone when I saw his headlights through my window. I waited for him to call out before I came downstairs with Moose. The kitchen window was completely smashed in, glass everywhere, snow already accumulating on my kitchen counter. My back door was wide open, swinging in the wind. The deputy searched my house and found that the intruder had gone through my living room, throwing some of my weather equipment around, and had taken my laptop from my desk, the one I use for weather reporting. He'd also taken my DSLR camera that I used to photograph storms, which had been sitting on my dining room table. We went outside to check the property. The footprints led from my back door toward the barn I have on the property, about 100 feet from the house. The barn is old and mostly empty, though I store my grandfather's old farm equipment in there. The deputy and I approached carefully. The barn door was open. Inside, we found my laptop sitting on an old workbench, screen smashed. My camera was there too, also destroyed. And there was a message written in the dust on the workbench, "Not a real storm." The deputy took photos of everything and called for backup. They searched the area, but found no one. The footprints led from the barn toward the road, and then disappeared where the snow had drifted over them. No vehicle tracks anywhere they could find. I stayed at my neighbor's house for the rest of the storm and the next 2 days after. The county sheriff's department investigated, but had no leads. The phone number was another untraceable burner. They dusted for fingerprints, but found nothing useful. The person must have worn gloves. The thing that bothers me most is the message, "Not a real storm." What did that mean? Was this person angry about weather spotters? Did they think I was exaggerating conditions? Or was it something else entirely? I still live in the farmhouse, but I've installed a proper security system with cameras covering all approaches to the house. I replaced the broken window with one that has a security film. I keep the shotgun closer now, though I hope I never have to use it. Moose has become even more protective, which I appreciate. It's been almost a year now, and whoever it was has never come back, at least as far as I know. The case is still technically open but cold. I still do weather spotting, but I'm a lot more careful about what information I post publicly. I realized afterward that my reports included my exact location coordinates, which probably made it easy for someone to find me. Looking back, I should have called 911 the moment I found the first set of footprints on my porch. I should have taken it more seriously instead of trying to rationalize it as someone needing help. In a blizzard like that, anyone legitimately needing help would have knocked or called out, not just walked around my house silently. But when you live alone in a rural area, you sometimes talk yourself out of fear because calling for help over nothing seems embarrassing. I learned that lesson the hard way, and I'm grateful it didn't end worse than it did. For context, I should mention that I'm partially colorblind, red-green deficient specifically, which becomes relevant later. I'm a 23-year-old guy living in a small town in northern Michigan, and I've been doing astrophotography as a hobby for about 2 years now. This happened last March, right after the spring equinox when the nights were still long enough for decent shooting time. I have this spot I go to regularly, about 15 minutes outside town near Lake Huron. It's an abandoned lighthouse keeper's cottage with a clear view of the sky, minimal light pollution, and access to the rocky beach below. The property's been empty for years, and while it's technically private land, nobody's ever bothered me about being there. I've been going twice a week, weather permitting, for the past 8 months. That particular Tuesday, I finished my shift at the hardware store around 6 p.m. and headed straight home to grab my equipment. My dog, a German Shepherd named Axis, always comes with me on these trips. He's good company, and I feel safer having him around in isolated spots. I loaded up my Canon EOS R6, my Manfrotto tripod, a thermos of coffee, and my Celestron binoculars into my 2015 Honda CR-V. We arrived at the cottage around 7:45 p.m., just as twilight was fading. The temperature was hovering around 35 degrees, cold enough that I could see my breath, but not unbearable. I remember Axis seemed more excited than usual, running around and sniffing everything more intensely than he normally would. I figured maybe a deer had been through recently. I set up my equipment in my usual spot on the south side of the cottage ruins, where I had a clear shot of the Milky Way's core. The forecast showed clear skies all night, perfect for a long exposure session. I was planning to stay until around 11 p.m. to capture some shots of the Galactic Center. About an hour into shooting, Axis started acting strange. He kept looking toward the beach path and whining, which wasn't like him. I scanned the area with my flashlight, but didn't see anything. The beach below was empty, just rocks and the sound of waves. I chalked it up to him, hearing an animal I couldn't detect. Around 9:30 p.m., I decided to take a break and walk down to the beach to get some foreground shots of the rocks with the stars above. That's when I noticed something odd. There were fresh footprints in a muddy path leading down. Boot prints, much larger than my size 10 Adidas. I compared them to my own treads, and they were completely different. Someone else had been here recently, maybe within the last hour based on how fresh they looked. Here's where I made my first mistake. I convinced myself it was probably just another photographer or a late evening walker who had already left. The prints led down to the beach and then seemed to loop back up toward the parking area, so I figured whoever it was had come and gone. I continued shooting. At 10:15 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Nice camera setup. My stomach dropped. I looked around but saw nothing except darkness beyond my small circle of light. I immediately thought it might be the property owner finally showing up to tell me to leave, so I called out, "Hello? Sorry if I'm trespassing. I can pack up and go." No response. Just the wind and the waves. I texted back, "Who is this?" No reply. Axis was now standing rigid, staring toward the tree line east of the cottage, growling low in his throat. I've never seen him act like that before. I started packing my gear as quickly as I could, my hands shaking. As I was detaching my camera from the tripod, my phone buzzed again. "You can't see me, but I can see you." I didn't even finish packing properly. I grabbed my camera, left the tripod, and called Axis. We practically ran to my car. As I fumbled with my keys, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. My driver's side door was slightly ajar. I always lock my car, always. And there on my dashboard was my missing lens cap that I'd lost 3 weeks ago at this exact location. I got in, locked the doors, and immediately tried to start the car. The engine turned over but died. Then again, and again. I've had this car for years, and it's never had starting problems. In my rearview mirror, I saw a figure step out from behind the cottage ruins, just a dark silhouette against the starlight, maybe 6 feet tall, wearing what looked like a dark jacket and pants. The person didn't run toward me or make any aggressive moves. They just stood there, watching. On the 4th try, my engine caught. I reversed so fast I nearly hit a tree, then tore down the dirt road back toward town. I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights following me, but there was nothing. When I got home around 10:50 p.m., I was still shaking. I checked my car thoroughly and found a small magnetic GPS tracker under my rear wheel well, a cheap black rectangular thing, probably bought on Amazon. That's when I realized whoever this was had been tracking my trips to the lighthouse for who knows how long. I tried to sleep, but couldn't. Around 2:30 a.m., Axis started barking frantically at my bedroom window. I live on the ground floor of a duplex with windows that face the backyard. I grabbed my aluminum baseball bat from my closet and carefully looked through the blinds. At first, I couldn't see anything in the darkness. Then my motion-activated porch light clicked on, and I saw him. The same figure from the lighthouse was standing in my backyard, about 20 feet from my window, holding what looked like my tripod, the one I'd abandoned. He was just standing there, facing my window. I immediately called 911 and locked myself in my bathroom with Axis, keeping the bat ready. I gave the dispatcher my address and explained everything as calmly as I could. She said officers were 7 minutes away. Those 7 minutes felt like hours. I could hear Axis growling and barking at the bathroom door, and at one point, I heard what sounded like someone testing my back door handle. My duplex has a pretty standard lock, nothing special, and I remember thinking how easy it would be to kick in. Then I heard a sound that still gives me chills, my doorbell ringing, 3 times slowly, deliberately. I knew it wasn't the police because they wouldn't announce themselves like that. Whoever was out there wanted me to know they were at my front door now. The police arrived at 2:43 a.m. according to the report they gave me later. They searched the property and found the tripod abandoned in my backyard, along with boot prints in the soil beneath my window. My back gate, which I always keep latched, was standing wide open. They searched the neighborhood, but found no one. I showed them the GPS tracker, the texts, and told them about the lens cap. They took photos of everything and filed a report. One officer suggested I stay somewhere else for a few days, so I packed a bag and went to my parents' house across town with Axis. The police tried to trace the phone number, but it was from a burner phone that's been inactive since that night. They checked the GPS tracker, but it was a generic model you can buy anywhere with cash. No way to trace it. They increased patrols in my neighborhood for about a week, but after that, things went back to normal. I never went back to that lighthouse spot. I sold most of my astrophotography equipment a month later. I just couldn't bring myself to go out to isolated locations anymore. The tripod the person left in my yard, I threw it away. I couldn't stand looking at it. It's been 9 months now, and I still check my car for trackers every single time I get in it. I installed security cameras on both doors of my duplex and got better locks. The person was never identified or caught. Sometimes I wonder if they were watching me for all 8 months I've been going to that spot, or if it was just the last few weeks. I wonder what they wanted and what would have happened if my car had started on the first try. All I know is that I'll never go night photography alone again, and I'm a lot more careful about establishing routines that make me predictable. Looking back, I should have been alarmed the moment I got that first text. I should have left immediately instead of trying to rationalize it. But you never think something like this will happen to you until it does.